Hey guys, tonight we begin in a fog. Not the kind that settles in the streets after rain, but the kind that drapes itself over your thoughts. That subtle haze of unmet plans, heavy moods, and half-formed expectations. You've had days like this. Days where nothing went the way it was supposed to. When people didn't say what they should have. When time didn't bend to your calendar and everything felt a little heavier than it needed to. But here's the thing. We're not here to fix the fog. We're here to walk through it. This story isn't about achieving clarity or control or perfect peace. It's about discovering the quiet freedom that lives beneath your expectations. Because you will not be able to control the world, but you can control yourself. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like it, share your city and what time it is where you are. There's something calming about knowing we're not alone in this stillness. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin by noticing your breath, how it doesn't ask for permission. It simply moves, in out, no demand, no resistance, like a tide that's forgotten the need to impress the shore. Tonight, you're walking slowly. You feel the air brushing your skin, cool and almost damp. Street lamps glow like distant lighthouses in the mist. You're not in a hurry. There's nowhere to be, no one waiting. Just you, the fog, and the steady rhythm of your steps. Expectations often live in the future. They whisper things like this should happen, or you deserve that, or why hasn't it gone your way? And even though these thoughts seem harmless, almost helpful, they carry a hidden weight. One that tightens your shoulders, one that pulls your attention away from what is and toward what should have been. The Stoics had a word for this kind of tension, attachment, not to objects or people, but to outcomes. Epictetus, who was once a slave and then a teacher, said something that feels very real in moments like this. Freedom is the only worthy goal in life, but not the kind of freedom we often imagine, no. He meant inner freedom, the ability to walk through the world and remain whole, even when your plans don't survive the day. You take another step. Your foot makes a soft sound on the damp pavement. The fog doesn't clear, but it no longer feels threatening. It just is, and you just are. Earlier today, maybe you expected someone to respond differently. Maybe you wanted the meeting to go better. Maybe you hoped a friend would reach out, or your work would be noticed, or your plans would align. But none of those things happened. And so now you find yourself, as you often do, drifting in the in-between. And it's here, right here, that the Stoic path begins. You don't need to fix the fog. You don't need to make people understand you, or earn their affection, or force reality into shape. All you need to do is return to what's truly yours. Your perspective, your effort, your response. There's a calm that rises when you realize the outer world doesn't owe you satisfaction. It's like setting down a heavy bag you didn't know you were carrying. Some philosophers argue about this. They say, but if we let go of expectations, don't we lose ambition? Don't we stop caring? But maybe that's the wrong frame. Maybe, like a gardener who plants a seed and still sleeps soundly at night, we can act with care without demanding a specific bloom. Marcus Aurelius wrote most of his thoughts to himself. Not for glory, not for praise, just reminders, just clarity. Imagine him sitting in his tent, weary from war, scribbling in the dark about the impermanence of power, the fleeting nature of approval, and the importance of self-command. You're not in a tent and you're not an emperor, but in your own life you carry a kind of crown too, one of presence, one of conscious choice. You can choose not to feed the fog with worry. You can walk with it instead. Let's touch a small paradox now just for fun. Letting go isn't passive. It takes effort. You have to practice detaching. You have to choose not to chase. You have to notice the moment your mind begins to script an outcome and gently return it to the simplicity of what is. Like now, right now, there's nothing to solve. No email to answer. No apology to wait for, just this walk, just this quiet. It's a bit funny, isn't it? That we're often most peaceful when we stop trying to be at peace. You come to a bench. Sit for a moment. Feel the cool wood beneath you. Listen to the silence around you, how even silence has texture. A distant dog barks. A car sighs down the street. Somewhere a curtain is drawn closed, and still the fog lingers. But now it's softer. Less enemy, more companion. It reminds you that not everything must be seen clearly to be trusted. You breathe. You feel the rise and fall in your chest. You don't reach for anything. Not a result. Not a person. Not even an insight. And in this pause, something stirs inside you, not revelation but recognition. You are already enough. Not because you've accomplished something. Not because someone validated you, but because you showed up for this moment. As you are, without needing it to be anything else. The fog thickens again, but this time it's okay. You stand slowly and continue walking. You keep walking. The path ahead remains soft and muted, just like your thoughts. The fog hasn't lifted, but strangely it doesn't need to. The heaviness of needing things to go a certain way has started to fall away. But then something else surfaces. A memory. A plan you once held tightly. Maybe it was something small, a trip, a conversation, a goal you mapped out carefully. Or maybe it was bigger, something you built your identity around. Either way, you remember the moment it all began to fall apart. There's a particular sting when life doesn't follow the script you wrote for it. You remember sitting with your hopes neatly arranged, like cups on a shelf. And then one by one, they tipped. Not with a crash, just a quiet fall. The Stoics would nod gently here, because this is exactly where the practice begins, not when things go right, but when they don't. You remember Epictetus again, who once said, "It's not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them." Plans unravel, but your mind is what weaves the panic. You believe that certain outcomes would deliver peace or joy or validation. But now, in their absence, you're left with something else, space. And space can be frightening. When your plans fall apart, your identity feels suddenly unanchored. Who are you if you're not the one succeeding, the one being chosen, the one who always gets it right? You stop walking for a moment and let that question linger. Across the misty street, you see a small tree, leaning slightly, shaped by wind and time. It didn't grow according to design. No symmetry, no perfection. And yet it's beautiful in its own crooked truth. Maybe that's you too. You don't have to grow the way you imagined. There's a story the Stoics would appreciate, one not of philosophers but of a general, Scipio Africanus. At the peak of his career, he defeated Hannibal and was hailed as a hero. But political tides turned. He was accused, ridiculed, and exiled from Rome. Did he rage against it? He did not. He walked away from power. He lived quietly. He accepted what came and released what didn't. His legacy, it turns out, wasn't just in victory, but in the grace with which he accepted loss. You wonder, could you do the same? There's a kind of peace that hides inside surrender, but not the kind where you give up on life. No, it's the surrender of control over what life owes you. It's the surrender of needing a guarantee. Some philosophers argue here. If you always let go of expectations, won't you become passive? Won't you stop dreaming big? But maybe there's a deeper wisdom in acting without clinging. Like a sailor who sets sail not because the wind is certain, but because the sea is calling, and that is enough. You can still act, still hope, still care, but you release the belief that your joy depends on any of it going exactly to plan. You pass a small cafe, closed now, chairs stacked inside, lights dimmed. Once you might have imagined a version of the night where you sat there, laughing with someone, living out a scene you pictured weeks ago. But that night didn't happen, and maybe it never will. Instead, you're here. Alone, quiet, real. And there's a strange comfort in that. You let yourself feel the disappointment, not as something to fix, but as something that simply exists. Like weather. It passes through you, not as a failure, but as a part of being alive. You reach a crosswalk and the signal blinks red. You wait, not because you're in a rush, but because waiting is its own kind of meditation. You remember a line not from a book, but from inside yourself. I am not my plans. I am how I walk when they fall apart. You breathe deeper. When the light turns, you step forward with no destination, only intention. You don't need to resist this moment. You don't need to escape it. It is already enough. The sidewalk ahead glistens faintly with leftover rain, and maybe your heart does too, not with sadness exactly, but with something clearer, a soft steadiness, the kind that comes not from getting what you want, but from learning you don't need it to be okay. And in that realization, something shifts. Your shoulders lower, your pace slows, and in this moment your expectations lose their grip on you. Maybe they'll return, of course they will, you're human, but for now you walk freely. You walk not toward a specific outcome, but with a gentle awareness that whatever comes next, you'll meet it with grace. That's the gift of plans falling apart. They strip away the illusion. They return you to what's real. And what's real is this breath, this step, this moment. You pause for a second under a quiet awning. The street is still empty. The fog's thicker now, but it doesn't feel like a wall. It feels like a blanket. You could almost believe the world has disappeared and left only this, the rhythm of your breath, the sound of your steps, and the steady unfolding of thought. You think back to all the times you tried so hard to make things go your way, the conversations you rehearsed, the emails you over-edited, the hours you spent spinning the wheel of what if. And even when things worked out, the relief never lasted, because there was always something else. Another plan, another person, another moment to control. It's exhausting, isn't it? The Stoics understood this. They saw how control was the grand illusion of our age, perhaps of every age. We grasp at the reins of life like a rider trying to command the wind. But life doesn't take orders, it unfolds, with or without your permission. Epictetus spoke often of the dichotomy of control, what's up to you and what isn't. Your actions, your values, your perspective, that's yours, everything else. Not so much. Traffic, whether other people's choices, whether or not someone replies, whether or not the opportunity comes. Those things are outside your grasp. You look down at your hands as if to remind yourself they're empty. And that's not a loss, that's a kind of peace. There's a strange irony here. The more tightly you try to grip life, the more slippery it becomes. But when you loosen your hold, when you allow things to happen without resistance, something beautiful takes shape. Flow, trust, the gentle power of presence. It's like standing in a river and finally stopping your fight against the current. You don't get swept away, you start to float. A subtle smile touches your face, maybe for the first time all day. The ancient Stoics didn't preach apathy. They didn't say don't care. They said care deeply, but wisely. Marcus Aurelius still governed an empire after all. He still showed up for duty each day. But he did so knowing he could not command outcomes, only his effort. One night, he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." You whisper that to yourself, not as a command but as a gentle remembering. Realize this and you will find strength. You turn a corner now. A cat darts across the sidewalk, silent and fluid. It pauses to glance at you, then slips into the shadows. It didn't ask your opinion. It didn't care what kind of day you had. Life just continues. You smile again, because it's so utterly out of your control, and that feels oddly reassuring. Some thinkers push back here. Isn't it defeatist, they say, to accept so much? But the Stoics never meant submission. They meant alignment, like a sailor adjusting the sails, like a musician tuning the string to the pitch life offers, not the one they wish for. You remember a day that didn't go your way. Maybe it was recent, maybe years ago. You tried to fix it. You tried to make someone understand, but nothing shifted. Not really. You left that moment feeling depleted, not because it failed, but because you were carrying the burden of control. And what if next time you didn't? What if instead you paused, breathed, and asked, what's truly mine in this moment? You pass a small park. There's a bench there wet with mist. You sit anyway. The damp seeps into your clothes, but it's not unpleasant, just real. You watch the trees sway. They don't fight the breeze. They dance with it. They bend, but they don't break. You close your eyes. Behind them, an old pattern plays out. one where you try to manage every outcome, predict every reaction, control every detail. It's so familiar, so human. But now you ask yourself, who would I be without this pattern? Would I be weaker or lighter? Would I be lost or finally free? You open your eyes and see the same trees, the same bench, the same fog. But something inside you has shifted, just slightly. A sense that maybe you don't need the world to cooperate for you to feel steady. Maybe peace isn't what happens when life aligns. Maybe peace is what happens when you do. And now that paradox again, soft and smiling. You gain control the moment you stop needing it. You take another breath, this one deeper than before, not because something's changed outside, but because something's softened within. A car passes in the distance, its headlights diffused into halos by the fog. You don't follow it with your eyes. You just watch it come and go, like expectations, like thoughts, like weather. Let them pass, let them be. You stand up damp but unbothered. You start walking again, not to get somewhere but to stay with yourself. The fog hasn't lifted. The world is still uncertain, but now so are you. And in that uncertainty, you begin to find something precious, a kind of quiet freedom. The pavement glistens under your feet as if holding the memory of rain. You keep walking, not quickly, not slowly, just enough to match the pace of your breath. You've started to notice how much you crave resolution. The clean ending, the clear answer, the tidy bow. And when life doesn't offer one, when it just keeps unfolding, one imperfect moment after another, you feel that restlessness bubble up again. But maybe that restlessness isn't something to be solved. Maybe it's something to be witnessed. The Stoics understood this unease. They knew we are creatures of anticipation. Our minds leap forward, building narratives about what's to come, layering expectations over the present like fog on glass. But they also knew that anticipation is where anxiety lives. You pass a low wall covered in ivy. Some of the leaves have browned at the edges. You reach out and touch one, surprised by its texture, soft, like paper worn thin. It doesn't resist your fingers. It doesn't care if you approve of its shape. It just is. And that's what you're learning tonight, how to let yourself just be. You recall a moment from your past, one that still clings a little. Maybe it was a job interview, a date, a family holiday. You walked into it with a silent script. You knew how it should go. You knew what the other person should say, but they didn't. And instead of seeing that as reality unfolding in its own way, you saw it as failure, as loss, as something wrong. Why? Because you had a picture in your head, and the world didn't match it. Seneca would smile gently at that. He once wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Not because we're dramatic, but because we expect the world to bend toward us. But what if it didn't have to? What if disappointment wasn't a verdict, but just a sign that you're returning to reality? That your map didn't match the terrain, and now it's time to walk without it. There's a small irony here, soft and a little sad. The more detailed your plan, the more fragile your peace. You take another breath. The air smells faintly of damp leaves. You imagine Marcus Aurelius, writing in his tent by the lamplight, tired and aching from battle. He wasn't clinging to fantasies of comfort. He wasn't begging the world to conform to his ideals. He was reminding himself, what is within me remains mine. What is outside, let it be. You wonder if you can say the same. Of course, not everyone agrees. Some say that expectations are necessary, that without them we drift. But the Stoics would ask, expectations of what? Of how life should unfold, or of how you will respond no matter what unfolds. That's the shift. You don't give up intention, you give up insistence. You can still want things, you can still dream, but you hold those dreams with open hands, like sand, like water, grasped too tightly and they slip through. As you walk, you remember someone once told you to just stay positive. It sounded nice. It also felt hollow, because sometimes life isn't positive. Sometimes it's silent, unfair, mysterious. The Stoics didn't offer forced optimism. They offered presence, a kind of dignity in facing the world as it is, not as you demand it to be. A breeze touches your face, light and cold. For a moment it feels like someone brushing past you, a memory maybe. You can't name it, but you let it pass through. Because that's the lesson here, isn't it? Everything passes through. Joy, disappointment, desire, regret. You don't have to hold them. You only have to greet them, acknowledge, accept, and let them move on. You think of a conversation that didn't go the way you hoped. Maybe they misunderstood you. Maybe they didn't offer the response you needed. It hurt, but underneath that hurt, if you're honest, there was something deeper, the expectation that they would validate you, that they should. And when they didn't, you felt unmoored. But now, here in the fog, in the night, in this drifting meditation, you realize something else. Your worth was never theirs to confirm. That's yours, always has been. And that realization doesn't arrive with trumpets or fanfare. It arrives like the wind, quiet, unassuming, true. You pause again, this time by a chain-link fence overgrown with vines. You trace your fingers across it. The metal is cold, solid, real. You've spent years waiting for something outside to make you feel solid, to prove that you're enough, that your path is valid, that your pace is right. But none of that is coming. And that's not a tragedy, it's freedom. You step back, take one more look around, and smile, not because the world is perfect, but because you are learning not to require it to be. You're no longer demanding clarity. You're inviting mystery. You're no longer chasing resolution. You're allowing motion. And with each step forward, the quiet grows inside you, like the calm of a sea after the wind has passed, like the moment before sleep. You walk beneath a row of old street lamps. Their glow is soft, just enough to see your path, not enough to push the fog away. That feels right somehow. Because clarity tonight isn't about spotlighting every answer. It's about finding comfort in the dim light of understanding, just enough to see the next step. No more. You think about the future, how often it shows up dressed in worry. Deadlines, decisions, what ifs, what now? You try to forecast every possibility as if worry were some kind of insurance policy, but it never is. Worry doesn't prepare you, it drains you. The Stoics knew this. They practiced what the modern world might call negative visualization, imagining loss not to court despair, but to strengthen appreciation. Not out of pessimism, but to train the heart. Picture, they said, what it would be like to lose what you cling to. Your home, your job, even the people you love. Not to dwell on tragedy, but to recognize all of it is borrowed. All of it is temporary. That truth stings. You recoil from it at first, but then something else happens. You start to cherish. Suddenly, the mundane isn't so mundane. The sound of someone's laughter, the way the light filters through your kitchen window, the last sip of coffee, because you remember. Nothing lasts. There's a bench beneath one of the lamps. You sit again, this time not to rest but to listen. You don't hear much, just the night itself. A dog barking far away, a leaf skittering across the sidewalk, the quiet hum of your own breath, and something shifts. You realize how often you miss this. The stillness, the in-between moments, the parts of life that happen when you're not chasing anything. So much of our suffering, you reflect, doesn't come from the present moment. It comes from the distance between what is and what we think should be. The argument that won't resolve, the job that didn't come through, the reply that never arrived. You keep telling yourself, if only they understood, if only I had tried harder, if only things went differently. But all that if only does is build a wall between you and now. Now, which is the only thing that actually exists. You breathe in again, deeper this time. And as the air fills your chest, you notice the irony, the gentle paradox. You were looking for peace in the future. But peace has always lived here, in the breath you almost forgot to take. You remember something Epictetus taught his students. He said, "Don't seek for events to happen as you wish, but wish for them to happen as they do, and your life will flow well." At first, that might sound like surrender. But it isn't, it's strength, the kind that doesn't fracture when things change. You think of a time you got what you wanted, the relationship, the promotion, the trip. You thought it would finally fix the restlessness. But it didn't, not really. That sense of there must be more returned, always does. Because the root of restlessness isn't out there. It's the refusal to be with this, just this. The life that's happening quietly now, and even now some part of you resists. Maybe it always will. The part that wants to plan and perfect and prove. The part that's afraid silence might mean emptiness. But silence can mean fullness too. You look up. The sky is still cloaked, but you imagine the stars behind it. Constant, patient, bright. Even when you can't see them, they're there. That's how it is with the best parts of you. Your integrity, your calm, your willingness to begin again, always there. Just waiting for the noise to fade. And what about that noise? The voices that tell you to hurry up, to be more, to fix everything right now. They're not your enemies. They're echoes of an anxious world. You don't need to fight them. Just listen, thank them for their concern, and let them pass. Like weather, like fog, you close your eyes again. Inhale, exhale. You feel your feet on the ground, the cool bench under your legs, the air brushing your face. You're not lost. You're not broken. You're not behind. You're here. And that's enough. There's one more truth that comes to you now, quiet but clear. Freedom doesn't mean having no burdens. It means not being owned by them. You can carry grief and still move forward. You can hold longing and still find joy. You can let go of expectations and still care deeply, beautifully, bravely. You rise from the bench. The fog hasn't lifted, but you're not waiting for it to, because you're learning to see with something deeper than your eyes. Call it awareness. Call it presence. Call it the beginning of peace. You continue walking, no destination in mind, just this rhythm between footsteps and breath. A gentle procession into yourself. Tonight has begun to loosen something in you, not in a dramatic way, nothing loud, just a soft untying at the edges. The tension that used to sit behind your ribs, it's quieter now. You think about control, how tightly you've held it, how often you believed that if you could just get everything right, the rest would follow. That happiness would arrive like a reward for precision. But happiness doesn't work that way. Neither does peace. Peace comes when you stop arguing with what is. There's a small stream ahead, tucked beside a grove of trees. The water moves lazily with no urgency. It doesn't resist its path. It doesn't resent the rocks. It just flows. And suddenly you remember a story. One you once read about a philosopher, Cleans maybe, who compared life to a cart. The wheel rolls forward. You can walk beside it, cooperating with its movement. Or you can dig in your heels and be dragged. Either way, the cart goes on. The cart doesn't ask your permission. So much of your pain has come from being dragged, from resisting what already is. But you're starting to see that surrender is not the same as giving up. It's choosing to walk with the cart, not because you're weak, but because you're wise. Still, it's not easy. That part of you, the fixer, the planner, the one who tightens at uncertainty, it whispers, "But what if I stop trying? What if it all falls apart? What if I lose myself?" But then you remember, you are not what happens to you. You are how you meet what happens, and that meeting can be soft, even when the world isn't. You crouch near the water, watching it curve around a rock. It doesn't stop. It doesn't panic. It just finds another way. This is the lesson. Let life change your plans, but not your principles. You think of another Stoic, Musonius Rufus, not as famous as Seneca or Marcus, but no less steady. He taught that philosophy wasn't about fancy words, it was about daily decisions. How you live, how you respond, how you show up when things don't go your way. That's the real arena, the moment when your expectations die and you choose, again, not to die with them. You stand again, following the stream with your eyes. It disappears into shadow just beyond a cluster of trees. You can't see where it ends, but that doesn't matter. You don't need to see the end to keep going. There's a strange freedom in that. A quiet rebellion against the world's obsession with outcomes, with guarantees, with control. What if your life wasn't about arriving but unfolding? What if the meaning wasn't something you had to chase, but something you met moment by moment with curiosity and care? You pass a tree with bark like old hands, rough, cracked, beautiful in its age. You place your palm against it. It doesn't move. It doesn't need to. It has survived storms and seasons. Simply by standing. You wonder how often you've mistaken stillness for weakness. silence for passivity, letting go for losing, but maybe letting go is a form of strength. The kind that doesn't scream, the kind that doesn't posture, the kind that simply breathes through whatever comes. There's something humorous here, too, in the quiet way the universe humbles us. The more you try to master everything, the more life reminds you you're not in charge. A canceled plan, a missed train, a relationship that ends without explanation. You could rage, you could spiral, or you could smile and say, "Ah, there it is again, the cart rolling forward." It's not indifference, it's intimacy, the kind that lets life be itself. And in return, you get to be yourself too. That's the paradox the Stoics left us with. The more you accept what you can't control, the more power you discover within. It's not about shrinking. It's about anchoring. You don't dissolve, you deepen. You feel it now in your chest, in your breath. A sense that you're not floating anymore. You're rooted, not in circumstances, not in predictions, but in presence. And there it is again, the callback, the memory. That time you stopped expecting someone to act a certain way. And when they didn't, you didn't shatter, you just observed and moved on. It wasn't easy, but it was free. You can do that again. Maybe not every time, but often enough to matter. You touch your heart gently, not for drama, for grounding, just a reminder you are here. And that is no small thing. The fog is thinning now, not gone, but thinner. The trees are shapes again. The path is visible. You start walking. And as you do, a question arises. Not to answer, just to carry. What if this, right here, is the moment you've been waiting for? You walk farther into the night, into yourself. The sound of the stream has faded, replaced by wind brushing through tall grass. There's a rhythm to it, soft, uncertain, yet strangely calming, like breath, like thought, like change. You've been thinking about expectations, and how tightly they wrap themselves around hope. And now you begin to notice something subtler. How expectations also shape your image of yourself. Not just what you expect from others or from life, but what you expect you should be by now. Wiser, more accomplished, less reactive, more put together. You chuckle quietly. That inner critic, so relentless and precise. It never uses soft lighting. It's fluorescent, harsh, unflinching. And it always has a checklist. You should have figured it out by now. You should be more productive. You should have a plan, but who decided all those shoulds? Where did that voice even come from? Because when you listen closer, you hear how much of it was inherited. Family, teachers, ads, social media, even books you once found comforting. The voice isn't always yours, but it speaks in your tone. That's the trick. And the Stoics would nod gently. They'd say, know yourself, but start by noticing who you're not. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire and still doubted himself in the quiet of night, often reminded himself to ignore the crowd's applause and disapproval alike. What is praised, he wrote, is not always what is good, and what is good isn't always loud. You stop walking, drawn toward a fallen log. You sit again, feeling the grain of old bark beneath you. There's a stillness here that feels more honest than any advice you've been given, so you start stripping things away. Not physically, but mentally. Gently, you let go of the expectation to be constantly improving. You let go of the fantasy version of you, the one who always says the right thing. You let go of needing to be understood by everyone. And in the space left behind, something real remains. A version of you that is not polished, not filtered, but alive. Unfinished, curious. You realize now that perfection was never the goal. Presence was. You are not a product, you are not a brand, you are not a performance. You are a process. There's freedom in that, a defiant kind of joy. The joy of not needing to be a finished story. The joy of showing up anyway. You think of another Stoic, perhaps Seneca, writing to his friend Lucilius. He admitted often that he struggled, that he failed to live up to the virtues he taught. He wasn't a statue. He was a student, always learning, always beginning again. That's Stoicism, not the armor, the humility. And you begin to understand. Letting go of expectations doesn't mean losing yourself. It means meeting yourself as you are, without conditions. Somewhere nearby, an owl hoots. You smile. Nature doesn't try to be anything but what it is. The owl doesn't wish to be a hawk. The tree doesn't resent its crooked trunk. And yet, humans struggle endlessly to be anything but themselves. You remember a conversation, maybe years ago, with someone who looked at you and said, "You're allowed to change." And you didn't believe them. Because change felt like betrayal, like abandoning who you were supposed to be. But now you see, changing isn't betrayal. It's belonging to yourself as you evolve. There's an idea worth sitting with here. Maybe the person you're becoming isn't someone you need to find, but someone you're slowly allowing. And maybe that's why the Stoics emphasize daily reflection, not to fix yourself, but to become intimate with your own patterns, to soften around them, to live a little less automatically. What if, instead of chasing a better version of you, you cultivated a deeper relationship with the current one? What if discipline wasn't about punishment but devotion? What if progress was more like tending a garden than climbing a ladder? You begin to feel it again, that warmth in the chest, not from pride, from recognition. You are here, still breathing, still trying, and that counts. You look up. The stars have broken through in patches now, still veiled but visible. You trace a few with your eyes, not needing to name them. You just let them be stars, like you let yourself be. This, not ideal, not complete, but honest. Present, becoming. There's a quiet paradox the Stoics knew well. The more you let go of needing to be impressive, the more you become someone worth trusting, worth knowing, worth loving, not because you've arrived, but because you're real. You stand again, stretching your arms toward the dark sky. There's no one around to see, no one to validate the gesture, but still you do it, as a form of agreement, as a kind of quiet ceremony, a farewell to the false expectations, a welcome to the uncertain path ahead. And somewhere deep within, a thought lands with surprising tenderness. Maybe you don't need to reinvent yourself tonight. Maybe you just need to return to what's always been there, beneath the noise, beneath the rolls. Just you breathing. Enough. The night deepens, but your steps remain steady. There's a softness in your pace now, as though you're no longer walking toward anything. Just walking, just being. You're beginning to understand something fundamental, that there's no finish line to peace. No final version of you waiting behind some future achievement. You don't arrive at stillness. You return to it. And to return, you must release. Over and over. This, perhaps, is the art of being human, the unglamorous, repetitive act of surrendering what no longer fits, not because it's bad, but because it's done. A breeze moves through the trees like a sigh, gentle, full of memory. And you remember something too. That time you held on to an idea too tightly. Maybe it was a plan, a goal, a relationship. You clutched it like a life raft, afraid of what might happen if you let go. And then, eventually, you did let go. And nothing terrible happened. In fact, space opened. Possibility flowed in. But only because your hands were no longer full. This is what the Stoics called apatheia, not apathy, but peace through inner alignment. A state where your soul isn't yanked around by longing or fear, where you still care, but you care wisely. You're not indifferent, you're discerning. There's a historical echo here. Epictetus, once a slave, found freedom not through escape but through clarity. They could bind his body, but not his mind. He famously said, "You may fetter my leg, but my will remains free." That's not romanticizing suffering. That's reclaiming agency. And you begin to see now. Every time you let go of what you can't control, you reclaim something sacred, your self-respect. You're no longer bargaining with reality, you're dancing with it. And sometimes the dance is slow, awkward, grief-tinged, but it's yours. You come across a fork in the path. One trail winds uphill, barely lit, the other disappears into thick brush. Neither is obvious. Neither feels right or wrong. You pause not to calculate but to listen. There's no fear in this pause. Just presence. You realize that choosing isn't about guarantees, it's about values. About who you are when certainty isn't available. You smile. Because this is what you've been practicing. Not stoicism as control, but as composure. As the quiet confidence that whatever comes, you'll meet it fully. So you pick a path, not because it's clear, but because you trust yourself. And as you walk, you reflect on a paradox. Letting go doesn't make you weaker, it makes you truer. Because when you stop clinging to what isn't yours to hold, others' opinions, the past, the future, you become light enough to move with life, not against it. You recall a moment from earlier in the year, a disappointment, maybe small to others but sharp for you, and how for a while it haunted your inner world. You replayed it, tried to edit it in memory, tried to justify or erase. But eventually you didn't need to. Eventually it just became part of your story. No longer a wound, just a shape in the background, like the hills you're walking past now. Silent, present, no longer the center. That's what time does when met with patience. It turns sharpness into softness, noise into quiet, fire into light. And yet not everything fades with time. Some truths stay. Like this one, you are allowed to grow past what once defined you. You are allowed to change direction without apology, to rest, to begin again, to say, that was me, and now this is me. That's not inconsistency. That's evolution. And here you sense it again, that humorous twist the Stoics would point out if they were beside you now. How much of your stress came from trying to be consistent, even when your soul was asking for change. They'd remind you that nature is not rigid. It adapts, trees bend, rivers shift, animals migrate. You too are nature. So why hold yourself to standards that deny your living, breathing complexity? You pass a broken fence. It's wood gray with age, slumped but still standing. And there's a kind of grace in it. It no longer serves its original purpose. But it remains. Weathered, yes, but dignified. You wonder, what if dignity isn't about strength or status, but about honesty, about living in alignment with what is, not what should have been? You take a deep breath. Here, now, no masks. No scripts, just you and the wind and the dark. You remember someone once told you, don't lose yourself. And for years you thought that meant preserving your identity like glass. Fragile, protected, untouched. But now you see. You don't lose yourself by changing. You lose yourself by pretending, by performing, by gripping too tightly to who you think you're supposed to be. Real selfhood is fluid, like water, like breath. It adapts, but it never abandons. So you let go not because you're careless, but because you care deeply. About truth, about peace, about living without armor. And maybe that's what letting go really is, not the absence of care, but the arrival of clarity. You reach a clearing now, and above you the sky has opened. The stars are bold tonight, pinpricks of fire in the blackness. You stand still, head tilted back, not to wish, not to solve, just to witness. A part of you whispers, this is enough. And for once you believe it. The clearing stretches wide beneath the stars, and for the first time tonight you feel like the sky is truly watching you back. Not judging, not measuring, just seeing. You sit in the grass, cool and a little damp, the earth firm beneath you. There's no performance here, no agenda, no reward for effort, just the quiet fact of your existence. You belong to this moment, and it belongs to you. You think back to something you read once, perhaps in a forgotten book or scrawled in the margin of a journal. Freedom isn't the absence of responsibility, it's the presence of choice. That's when it strikes you. So much of your inner conflict isn't about what's happening, but about whether you feel chosen or forced. You've chased goals because you thought you had to. You've stayed silent when you wanted to speak. You've clung to routines not because they nourished you, but because they were familiar. And slowly, expectations became a cage you locked from the inside. But here, beneath the open sky, you remember what the Stoics insisted all along. Your mind is yours. No one can take that from you. Not hardship, not loss, not time. You think of Musonius Rufus, the lesser-known but deeply practical Stoic who taught that philosophy was not for reading, it was for living. He believed that freedom began not with outer rebellion but with the inner discipline to live by choice, not habit. And that's what you're doing now, isn't it? Choosing to pause, choosing to release, choosing to be. You lie back, the stars spinning slowly above, and a strange idea occurs to you, almost funny in its simplicity. Maybe freedom isn't loud. Maybe it doesn't come with banners or a soundtrack. Maybe real freedom feels like this. Unremarkable, unforced, and utterly at peace with not needing more. You chuckle again, a quiet sound in the stillness, because isn't that the opposite of what you've been taught? You were told freedom was expansion, accumulation, endless options. But the Stoics knew otherwise. They saw how desire multiplied suffering, how the more you needed, the more you feared, and the more you feared, the more you shrank from life. So instead of adding, they subtracted. They let go of illusions. They let go of excess. They let go of everything that made them forget their own power. Not power over others, but power over reaction. It's not glamorous, but it is holy. You remember a moment, not long ago, when someone misunderstood you, deeply. Perhaps even accused you of something untrue. And your first instinct was to defend, to explain, to correct the narrative. But instead, you paused. You waited. And in that pause, you realized, not every battle deserves your energy. That moment was your freedom. You didn't lose yourself by letting them be wrong. You found yourself in not needing to be right. That's the difference, isn't it? Between reacting and responding, between impulse and integrity. The wind picks up again, brushing across your arms. It's colder now, but it doesn't bother you. It belongs here, just like your thoughts do. You realize something gentle but profound. Your expectations have always been rooted in a desire to be safe, to be enough, to be certain. But certainty is a myth. And you, well, you're something better. You're adaptable, you're resilient. You're capable of uncertainty and still capable of love. There's another paradox the Stoics would smile at now. The less you cling to what you think you need, the more space you create for what truly matters. Like joy, like stillness, like truth. You sit up again, stretching your spine, breathing deeper now. You feel taller somehow, not from pride but from release. You're carrying less. It occurs to you that most of your suffering came not from life itself, but from the distance between life and your expectations of it. That gap between what is and what you hoped it would be is where your sorrow camped out for years. But now, you're walking closer to what is, and sorrow without a home begins to move on. You rise slowly, brushing grass from your hands, and take one last look at the sky. No revelations arrive, no lightning bolts, just a calm sense of return, to earth, to breath, to choice. You follow a narrow path that curves back into the trees, the darkness less intimidating now. You feel it wrap around you like a blanket, not a void but a cradle. You think of Marcus again, not the emperor now but the man, the one who wrote in secret, the one who questioned everything, the one who reminded himself daily that he could not control how others acted, only how he responded. That's real freedom. Not immunity from pain, but independence from chaos. You stop at a small stream, its trickle almost hidden in the dark. You kneel, touch the water, feel its chill. It keeps moving, regardless of who notices. It doesn't explain. It doesn't announce. It just is, like you. And maybe that's what this whole journey is about, not achieving some perfect balance, but remembering that you're already part of nature's rhythm. You've just forgotten the sound of your own current. And here tonight, you've begun to hear it again. So you smile, not because everything is figured out, but because it doesn't have to be. That's the quiet liberation of letting go. That's the beauty of becoming. You rise from the stream's edge with a softness in your bones. The ground beneath you feels different now, not firmer but friendlier. Like it's no longer something to conquer, just something to walk. There's something else too, a subtle absence. The absence of that old hum, anxious, restless, just beneath the surface. It's quieter now. Not gone entirely, but no longer running the show. You keep walking, and as you do, you find yourself thinking less. Not because your mind is empty, but because it's at ease. The Stoics called this ataraxia, a lucid tranquility, the kind that doesn't require perfect conditions to exist. You don't need a silent room or a meditation bell or a day without emails. You just need to choose where your attention rests. And right now it rests here. On the crunch of your steps, the scent of pine, the distant owl calling from the treetops. That's it, that's enough. You remember a story, a quiet one easily missed. Seneca, wealthy, powerful, yet deeply aware of life's unpredictability, used to practice poverty once a month. Not because he had to, but to remind himself he could survive without his comforts. He'd wear rough clothes, eat simple food, sleep on the ground, and in that voluntary discomfort he'd whisper to himself, "Is this what I feared?" Because fear shrinks when touched by reality. It's the unknown that bloats it. The idea that if I don't get this job, or if this person leaves me, or if I fail at this, I'll fall apart. But then you fall or stumble and realize you're still here, breathing, healing, becoming. That's what Seneca knew, and what you're learning now. As you walk, you notice the path has become a little wilder. Roots crisscross like veins and the soil is uneven. You stumble once, catch yourself, smile. Not because it's fun, but because it's real. This isn't a curated trail. It's life, untamed and textured. And here's the paradox. Letting go of expectations doesn't make things smoother, it makes you steadier. It's like the difference between glass and bamboo. Glass is beautiful, precise, but shatters under pressure. Bamboo, it bends, sways, adapts, and survives storms without breaking. You feel more like bamboo these days. And yet in this new softness, you're not passive. You haven't surrendered your direction, just the illusion of control. You still care, you still try, you still love, but you no longer demand guarantees. That's a subtle shift, but a radical one. You stop for a moment, lean against a tree, and think about a conversation you had, maybe with a friend, maybe with yourself, where the words, "I just want to be enough," came out. And you realize how many choices you've made from that place. How often you chased love, validation, even healing, not for their own sake, but as proof that you were okay. But what if you already are? Not perfect, not finished, but enough. It's strange, isn't it? That peace is not found by achieving more, but by wanting less. That stillness isn't something you earn, it's something you remember. A memory from childhood surfaces. You, sitting by a window during a storm, watching the rain bead and race down the glass. Time moved slowly then. You weren't productive. You weren't self-improving. You were just there. Maybe the rain knew something you didn't, something you're remembering now. That presence is its own kind of wisdom. The Stoics would nod at this. They never said, "Feel nothing." They said, "Feel wisely." Let the emotion rise, watch it, learn from it, and then let it pass. You walk again, slower now. Not because you're tired, but because rushing seems unnecessary. And in this space, questions arrive. Who would you be without the script? What would you choose if success weren't measured by applause? What parts of you are waiting for permission to exist? You don't rush to answer. Some questions are meant to echo. And yet, amidst them, you notice something comforting. You've made it through seasons you once thought would break you. You've survived endings you didn't choose. And through it all, you've stayed you, messy, changing, but still whole. There's a kind of pride in that. Quiet, earned. You hear a rustle in the brush, just a fox darting into the trees, wild, unbothered. It reminds you that nature doesn't explain itself. The tree doesn't justify its bent trunk. The river doesn't apologize for changing course. Why should you? You don't owe anyone a fixed version of yourself. You don't have to meet every expectation, especially your own. You just have to live. Intentionally, gently, honestly. You recall a phrase from Epictetus, paraphrased from memory, "Don't explain your philosophy. Embody it." And maybe that's the final letting go, not of goals or dreams or preferences, but of the need to perform who you are, to simply be who you are. You emerge from the trees into a small meadow. The moon is higher now, casting long shadows and silvering the grass. You lie down again, letting the earth support you. There's nothing more to fix tonight, nothing to prove. You've walked far, not in miles, but in mindset. And as your eyelids begin to flutter, not from effort but from ease, you whisper something, not to the sky but to yourself. "I am still becoming, and that's enough." The meadow hums with a silence that's almost musical. You feel it more than hear it, a low vibration like the world exhaling. You're not an observer anymore. You've become part of the stillness. Your eyes are heavy, but your mind isn't racing. That's a small miracle, isn't it? To be this quiet inside. No internal debate, no mental rehearsals, just breath and being. You trace the sky with your thoughts, no words, just presence. And somewhere between the moonlight and the grass, another realization forms. You've never needed to win your peace. You've just needed to stop arguing with what already is. It's a ridiculous idea, isn't it? That peace could be waiting in the very place you've spent years avoiding, the now, the moment without edits, the truth without gloss. The Stoics didn't chase pleasure or pain, they sought clarity. They practiced acceptance, not as surrender but as strategy, and that's what you're feeling now. A strategy that looks a lot like surrender, but is actually strength. You remember something Marcus Aurelius wrote, not in a speech but to himself alone. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. He was an emperor, a warrior, a philosopher. But in the end, like you, he was a human being trying to understand why we suffer when we expect the world to mirror our hopes. He knew what you're coming to know. Expectations are disguised attachments. And every attachment is a leash, binding your happiness to things you can't control. So you let go, not with a shout, not with fanfare, just with a breath. You lie back again, your arms outstretched as if to say, "Okay, life, I won't wrestle you tonight." And in that quiet act, you remember someone else, an artist perhaps, or a parent, or even yourself, who once made something not to impress but to express, who once loved someone without a guarantee, who once walked into uncertainty and found freedom, not fear. This is your version of that moment, because something strange is happening. You're not shrinking by letting go. You're expanding. Without expectations weighing you down, your spirit has room to stretch. You begin to wonder how many things in your life were chosen freely, and how many were chosen to avoid disapproval, or to earn love, or to prove worth. That's a painful reflection, but not bitter, just honest. And honesty is fertile ground for change. You imagine waking up tomorrow and doing one thing differently, not dramatically, but consciously. Not for approval, but from alignment. Maybe that's how it starts. Not with grand resolutions, but with small returns to yourself. You glance up at a cloud slowly crossing the moon and think, that's you. Not always visible, not always clear, but still moving, still part of the sky. There's a humility in that, and a kind of cosmic comedy. Because isn't it funny how the more you try to be everything, the less you feel like anything? And yet when you're simply yourself, unmasked, unpolished, you begin to feel whole again. You sit up, stretch slowly. There's a softness in your spine, a gentleness in your joints. Even the ache in your shoulders feels like it belongs. You think of another paradox, one the Stoics loved. You gain strength not by adding more, but by needing less. It's not about being invulnerable. It's about being undisturbed by what doesn't matter. You're not here to be indifferent. You're here to discern, to know what's yours to carry and what's never been yours at all. You look around and notice how the world just keeps happening. The leaves rustle without a plan. The grass bends without regret. The stars shine without apology. Nature expects nothing of you. So why do you expect so much from yourself? That question doesn't demand an answer. It just lingers, soft and spacious. You start walking again, not toward anything, just because walking feels good. Your body knows the way now. You don't need a destination, just motion. And in the rhythm of your steps, a new understanding begins to bloom. Letting go of expectations isn't a loss. It's a return. To what? To who you were before the world told you who to be. To that version of you who danced without wondering how it looked, who spoke without rehearsing, who rested without guilt. You haven't lost that self. You've just buried them under layers of striving. But now, one by one, those layers are falling away. And what's left is something softer, truer, and far more resilient than the mask ever was. You stop by a low tree, its trunk twisted and thick, its branches stretching like arms unafraid to be crooked. You touch its bark, rough and real, and a quiet laugh escapes you, because this tree isn't symmetrical, it isn't perfect, but it's alive, and so are you. So you sit beneath it, back against its trunk, heart steady. There's no lesson here, no final truth, just a gentle knowing. You're allowed to release what never belonged to you. You're allowed to fail without shame. You're allowed to not know and still be whole. You close your eyes. The world hums on. You belong to it. Not because you earned your place, but because you are. And that's enough. The tree's bark presses lightly into your back, grounding you in the most literal sense. Every breath feels like it's drawn straight from the soil, filtered through root and leaf, calm and steady. There's no rush, no urgency, just the rhythm of being. And in this rhythm, you begin to understand something deeper. Freedom isn't the absence of limits. It's the absence of illusion. You've spent so much time trying to be free in the way culture sells it. The perfect life, the perfect body, the perfect plan unfolding exactly as envisioned. But the Stoics had another idea, an older, quieter one. They believed freedom comes when you stop mistaking outcomes for meaning. You hear again Epictetus's lesson echoing in memory. Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. You don't control how others see you. You don't control whether the rain comes or whether the harvest grows. You don't even control the thoughts that arise, only whether you latch on to them. And yet, within those narrow lines, there's so much space. Like this moment, beneath a gnarled tree, on a night that doesn't care what your resume says or who texted you back. A moment that offers nothing, and in doing so, offers everything. You look up again and feel the vastness, not just of the sky, but of your own awareness. This vastness was always here. It just got crowded out by noise, by roles you thought you had to play, by stories about what success looks like, by the ever-present whisper that you are not enough yet. But here, with no audience and no script, you can finally ask, enough for what? You think of a moment years ago, a small one, maybe just walking to school or sitting in traffic, when a wave of dissatisfaction hit you for no clear reason. That sense of not quite there yet, even though nothing was really wrong. That moment wasn't unique. It's one that repeats in quiet cycles, because expectation feeds restlessness, and restlessness makes the present feel like a waiting room for something better. But what if there is no better? What if this is the thing? It's a daring thought, almost rebellious, but it sits well in your chest. You glance at your hands, they've held on to so much. Grudges, goals, people, identities, but now they rest open, relaxed. You imagine them as gates, not cages. Letting life pass through without trapping it. Letting love in without holding it hostage. You think of Musonius Rufus, teacher of Epictetus, who taught that philosophy is not an idea to admire, but a tool to live. He said virtue begins with everyday actions, not grand gestures, not public displays, but eating simply, speaking kindly, acting with intention. And so here's your paradox tonight. You let go not because you've stopped caring, but because you finally care enough to trust that your worth isn't contingent, to trust that joy can be quiet, to trust that who you are, without the layers, is enough to carry you forward. You lie down again, arms across your chest, and feel the earth beneath your spine. You're not floating anymore. You're rooted. And in this groundedness, another realization blooms. Letting go of expectations doesn't mean letting go of direction. You still have goals, still make plans, still care deeply. But now you do so from a place of freedom, not fear. From knowing that whether or not things unfold how you imagine, you will still return to yourself, calm, intact, unshaken. There's a strange kind of power in this posture, one that doesn't roar but radiates, a quiet power, a steady light. You think of someone watching you now, maybe a version of yourself from years ago, tired, confused, trying so hard to be what others expected. And maybe that version of you wouldn't understand this peace. Maybe they'd even fear it, thinking it looked too much like giving up. But now you know better. This isn't defeat, it's clarity. This isn't apathy, it's presence. You can still strive, but now you choose your direction carefully. Not because someone else told you it matters, but because you've listened to your own soul. And you've heard it whisper again and again. Let go, come home. You touch your chest, where your breath rises, where your quietest truths live. And for the first time in a long time, you don't wish it were different. You don't want to be anywhere else. Because right now you are not a project, you are not a brand, you are not even a story to perfect. You are a presence, a moment, a soft voice in the night that says, yes, this is enough. You begin to drift again, not into sleep just yet, but into that liminal space where insight and dream overlap. And somewhere there you ask, if I stopped needing things to turn out perfectly, how much more alive could I be? There's no answer, only the feeling of something heavy lifting off your shoulders. Not forever, but for tonight, you smile, because sometimes that's enough. A soft breeze brushes your cheek. It's so gentle it almost doesn't exist. Just a whisper of motion, like a memory passing through the body rather than the mind. You turn your head slightly, not because you must, but because the world invites you to. The tree behind you creaks faintly, the kind of creak that speaks of time, not where. Of years lived honestly through storms, droughts, quiet winters, and bursting springs. You imagine being that tree, never rushing, never needing applause. Just growing, slowly, secretly. And again the truth returns. You do not owe the world your perfection, only your presence. Expectation, you realize now, has so often disguised itself as virtue, wanting to do things well, wanting to be good, wanting to succeed. But under that sheen it has often been fear wearing a mask, fear of being invisible, of being unloved, of not mattering. But here, in this silence with no one to impress and nothing to prove, you feel how false that fear really is. You've always mattered, not because of what you did, but because of what you are, a part of this whole, a single note in this soft, eternal song. And you remember another Stoic paradox, one that's haunted and healed thinkers for centuries. To care less, you must first care rightly. Caring rightly isn't cold. It isn't apathy. It's precise. It's knowing what's your role and what belongs to the winds, the gods, the unknown. You think of Seneca, exiled from Rome not once but twice, forced to live with less than he ever expected. He once wrote that misfortune is opportunity in disguise, not because it makes you stronger, but because it shows you what strength was always there. Maybe your own exile hasn't been political. Maybe it was emotional. Maybe you've been cast out of someone's affection or walked away from a dream that turned bitter. Maybe you've lost faith in the version of your life you once chased with fire. But you haven't lost yourself. You were just shedding the husks. The versions of you shaped more by fear than by wisdom. You think about the irony, the sweet, sharp humor of it all. How the very things you thought would set you free, the plans, the praise, the control, often kept you caged. And how surrender, which sounded like failure, turned out to be the key. You smile at that. It's one of those Stoic truths that feels like a joke only the quiet get to hear. Like how grief and love live next door to each other. Or how doing less often reveals more. Or how every time you stop trying to be enough, you finally feel at peace. You breathe deeply, not with effort, just with fullness. The air has weight to it now, not heaviness but presence. You feel how everything around you is alive with meaning, even if it doesn't mean anything. Even if it just is. Isn't that enough? You look down and notice a small insect crawling along a blade of grass. Its movements are awkward, jerky, almost comedic. But there it is doing its work, not asking for glory, not aiming for a legacy. You wonder, what if your life too could be lived with that kind of sacred simplicity? No grand vision, no looming standard. Just one honest action after another. Maybe that's what the Stoics meant by virtue, not perfection, but integrity, wholeness, showing up to your place in the world with a clear mind and an open heart. That's what you've been circling all along, isn't it? This sense of wholeness, not as a reward but as your starting point. You stretch your legs, toes brushing against the cool earth, and you think, there is no better place than this. Not in terms of geography, but in terms of presence. Here, in this moment, you've released the myth that peace is something to arrive at. You've arrived, not by force, not by solving anything, just by letting it be. That's the great secret, the one hidden in the simplest words of Stoic thought. Live according to nature. Not nature as in forests and oceans, but your nature, the inner compass that's been drowned out by noise. You've heard it again tonight, that whisper behind all whispers: let go, come home, begin again. And so you do, without a plan, without a guarantee, just with trust. Trust that peace doesn't need permission. That rest isn't earned, it's remembered. That joy, the quiet kind, was never far. You lie back once more, feeling the grass cradle you like old arms. The stars blink slowly overhead, not in patterns but in patience. You close your eyes, not to escape but to listen. And somewhere in that listening a space opens. It has no name, no edges, no agenda, just this: you are enough. You've always been enough, and nothing you gain or lose can change that. The night is deeper now, not darker, just more still. Time feels suspended, like it's no longer passing through you but with you, shoulder to shoulder, quiet companions on the same path. And here, at the edge of this gentle silence, you begin to touch the final layer of letting go. The letting go of yourself as an idea, not yourself as a body, you're still here, still breathing. Not yourself as a soul, that thread of awareness still glows steady, but yourself as the version you've been managing. The image, the narrative, the you constructed to earn belonging. This is where many philosophers stopped and hesitated. Even the Stoics, with all their confidence in reason, could feel the enormity of this truth, that the self, too, is partly illusion, a collection of stories held together by memory and habit, not false, but not fixed either. You remember the thought experiment, the ship of Theseus. If every part of the ship is replaced piece by piece, is it still the same ship? And you wonder, if every role, every plan, every belief you once clung to has slowly fallen away, who remains? The answer arrives not in words but in warmth. You remain, the part that watches, the part that lives, not just performs. The observer behind the story, calmly witnessing each shift in the tide without becoming the tide itself. That's where your freedom lives now. Not in becoming someone new, but in no longer needing to be anyone at all. You can still play roles, still engage, still care. But now it's from a place of choice, not compulsion. You're not a character lost in a script. You're the storyteller, remembering the pen was always in your hand. You think again of Marcus Aurelius, writing in his journal during the final years of his life. The emperor-philosopher, battling illness, betrayal, and exhaustion. And still, each night, he returned to the page, not to craft poetry or seek praise, but to practice returning to himself. To live as nature requires, he wrote, is to live in accordance with reason. But reason is not harsh. It is gentle. It does not demand that the fruit ripen faster than it does. And so you learn to wait, patiently. You wait for peace to arrive, not as a prize but as a quiet realignment, a slipping back into rhythm, like a river returning to its banks after a storm. And with that rhythm, you feel something else awaken: forgiveness. Not just for others. That came earlier maybe, or maybe it's still hard, but now forgiveness for yourself, for the years you were confused, for the days you broke promises to your body, for the moments you clung not out of strength but fear. You forgive it all because you were never meant to be perfect, only present. You breathe out and it feels like exhaling a decade. The quiet paradox touches you again, so gentle it could almost be missed. You can only let go of expectations when you stop expecting even yourself to always let go perfectly. Even detachment can become a performance. But here, there is no performance. Only being, only truth, only rest. And that's where your wholeness begins again. You think back to a conversation long ago, perhaps with someone wise, or perhaps just a moment of strange clarity. They asked, "What would happen if you stopped trying to fix everything?" You didn't have an answer then, but maybe you do now. Nothing would happen exactly, but something would unfold, like petals easing open, like tension unwinding, like silence deepening. You wouldn't become passive, you'd become aligned. Aligned with what is, aligned with what matters. Aligned with the small voice inside you that doesn't shout, but never stops speaking. The Stoics called this the demon, the inner guide, a whispering flame that neither wind nor shadow can extinguish. Tonight, you feel it more than ever. It does not ask for action, only attention. And as you listen, truly listen, you realize the less you need things to be a certain way, the more you see them as they are. And they are enough. The people in your life, the days as they unfold, the face you meet in the mirror each morning, all of it, already whole even in its mess. You close your eyes again, not to escape the world but to sink into it, to become part of it, to dissolve the barrier between watcher and watched. You are not floating now, you are still. You are home. And as your breath slows and the thoughts quiet down and the tree behind you creaks once more in its ancient rhythm, you prepare for one final journey, not into sleep, not into forgetting, but into the deep, luminous truth that freedom was never something to win. It was the silence waiting underneath all your effort, the pause beneath the noise, the stillness within your heartbeat. You're almost there. Just one more breath. The stillness becomes complete. You're no longer chasing sleep. It's arriving like an old friend. Not barging in, not demanding, just gently joining you, bringing blankets of silence and the soft, steady drum of your heartbeat. This is the last part of the journey. Not the end, but the soft tapering of thought into breath, of striving into surrender. You remember now how much you've carried. Not just recently, but over the years. Expectations from others, hopes you were told to hold, visions of who you should become. Some of them served you once. Most were handed to you without your choosing, but you carried them all, dutifully, sometimes with pride, sometimes with pain, and tonight you've begun to set them down. Not as defeat, but as a kind of sacred clearing. The way a tree lets go of its leaves, not because it has failed, but because it trusts spring will return. Letting go does not mean losing. Letting go is how space is made, for truth, for peace, for the soft surprise of joy. You think again of Epictetus. Born into slavery, his body bent and broken, and yet his mind clear. He taught that we are disturbed not by things, but by the opinions we hold about them. And tonight, you feel the depth of that teaching, not just as a clever line, but as a lived truth. All your life, you've reacted to shadows, to projections, to the invisible walls built from imagined futures and feared failures. But what if none of those are real? What if the only thing real is this breath, this moment, this gentle knowing that you do not need to hold so tightly? Some philosophers argued whether inner freedom is possible at all, whether the mind can ever fully escape the grip of biology, of culture, of time. But tonight you don't need to win that argument. You felt it, even for a moment, and that's enough. The sky above you remains unchanged. No grand epiphany, no dramatic sign. Just the stars, quiet and unbothered, burning slowly in a darkness that holds everything. And in that quiet, you feel your body softening, each part of you letting go, not just physically, but in spirit. The part of you that needed answers, the part that always tried to do it right, the part that feared missing out, being behind, falling short. They're all welcome to rest now, because the truth is you are already here. No need to hurry. No need to catch up. You didn't miss anything. Life is not a race, it's a rhythm, and you are learning to dance with it. One breath, one release, one surrender at a time. And so, in these final moments, we return to where we began. Not with resolution, but with presence. Not with a solution, but with space. To live with less expectation is not to become numb, it is to become open. Open to beauty you didn't plan. Open to moments that surprise you. Open to yourself as you really are. Whole, incomplete, beautifully both. There will still be days that challenge you, of course. You're human. You will still feel pain, still wrestle with longing, still wish things were different sometimes. But now, perhaps, you'll remember this quiet. This place inside you that doesn't demand the world to bend. This still room in your soul that simply watches, breathes, and stays. Letting go without losing, loving without clinging, living without needing to perform. And maybe, just maybe, you'll come back to this feeling, not just tonight, but in waking life, in a crowded subway, in a long conversation, in the mirror one quiet morning. And when you do, you'll smile softly, because you'll remember, you don't need to be anything more than here, just you, present, enough. Now let your breath slow, let your thoughts blur, and let yourself drift into the gentle dark, into the soft hum of peace, into rest not as escape but as return, into sleep not as forgetting but as remembering who you were beneath it all and who you still are. Now sleep gently. And now let's quiet everything just a little more. Let your body grow even heavier, like a stone settling into soft earth. Every muscle loose, every breath slower, every part of you held by the bed, the air, the dark itself. There is nothing else to do, nothing left to fix, or solve, or become. You've let go not just of expectations, but of the pressure to be anywhere else but here. You may feel a trace of thought still moving. That's okay. Let it drift like a feather through the room. Watch it go. No need to follow. Let your mind soften like mist on a quiet lake. Let your heart stop explaining itself. You've said enough for today. The stories can wait. The questions can wait. The world will still be there in the morning. Turn